Hello and welcome to the Peace is an Action Verb podcast. I'm here with my friend Lisa Turner. So, like I do with all of the introductions, I'm going to tell you how I know Lisa and then give Lisa a chance to introduce herself. So, Lisa and I met in an online forum associated with Tree Sisters, maybe 5 years ago, 4 years ago. It's hard to say how long it's been. And so we got to know each other in a time that we were online in a rather large women's circle, sharing some pretty remarkable experiences and a journey around the Tree Sisters Inner Journey Wheel. So, Lisa, I'd like to give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Oh, that's really
As little or as much as you want to say. We'll get into our conversation.
yeah. So I don't even know where to begin. Yeah, I feel like a very eclectic person. My interests are very broad, and I work in mental health. But actually, my passion is art and trees, and I'm just trying to weave lots of different things together. And that's as Christine said,
Wonderful.
how we know each
Yeah.
other as Tree Sisters, which is a beautiful network. So.
Yeah, thank you. So I have this list of verbs in front of me. And so when I was thinking about inviting you, I jotted down and shared with you the verbs that came to mind. So um, we can jump in anywhere really, but I'd like to start with a more recent uh, a recent exploration that you have, which is the macrame. And so making handmade things, and we were talking about making art. So how did you actually get drawn to macrame?
That actually happened. It was a lockdown thing. So it was just as we were about to go into lockdown. I kind of thought I've always been very creative, and I thought I need something new. I need to learn how to do something new. And it was just that I'd seen some of those pot holders, like the sort of 70s style pot holders, and I like my plants. So I thought I'll make some of them. And I did. I sort of taught myself through watching videos and things like that and books, and I just literally haven't stopped. So every day I've been doing more not. And the things have gone from pot holders to wall hangings to wedding backdrops that are like 7 foot wide, and now
Wow.
I'm clothes. So it's shape shifted a lot in 2.5 years, but it's
So it seems like that that verb of making handmade things or making art, those two verbs, they also it's actually not even one that I have on your list, but they also require being alone. Yes. And balance, right? Because you're also a mom and you also are a partner and a community member and an employed person. So that's a lot of balancing, right? So can you tell us a little bit about how you weave this activity into your day and how it feeds you and balances you?
yeah, it really does. I mean, it absolutely does give me that balance, and I've sort of managed to weave it into my day. As in, I'll start a project when I've got time. At the moment, I only work my sort of mental health job 3 days a week, which gives me another 2 days a week. Usually, although it's summer holidays now, so that's not happening. But usually I have 2 days where I'm at home alone, and that's when I do my craft. And then it weaves into the other days. Like I've started getting up a lot earlier in the morning, and if I'm working on a project, it can be 6 in the morning, and I'll be there just sort of tinkering away, and then late at night as well. So just always find there's a space somewhere. But I am lucky, I'm fortunate, I have those couple of days to kind of really get started with projects.
That's such my situation is similar currently. I'm working 3 days a week for somebody else, and then I have these 2 days a week and a little bit of weekend time, for my own endeavors. And seems like such a sane way to live, and how wonderful for anybody that can get to that place of balance, which requires a certain amount of here's another verb, finding and holding healthy boundaries. Um, because doesn't society expect us to work full time? And,
I think within my type of work that I do as well, a lot of or quite a few of my colleagues who have worked full time are now bringing it back, because I'm a support worker in mental health, and it's quite demanding. And
For sure.
every day, 9 to 5 every day, and you've got your family when you come home, and it's just, it's quite a lot. So I keep sort of dallying with the idea of doing more, but actually I think that balance for me is creativity, and that gives me enough. I'm full enough that I can then help in the world more.
And how important that is to take care of yourself, to this the self-care part of it, and that expectation of being there 9 to 5, 5 days a week, it, it can be depleting. And so good for you and good for your family, for figuring out how to make this work. And yeah, anyhow, like I said, it's the similar rhythm to what we have going on over here too. So Lisa, going back to the knot tying, when you so I've been watching you on Instagram, posting works in progress and then the finished project. And so there was a couple of weeks ago, maybe not even that long, where you said, hey community, who has a dress form that I can borrow because I am being called to make clothing. And so you're talking about this started during the pandemic. You started with, I love plants, I love those 1970s plant holders or pot holders, and then you studied, you watched videos, you read, and yet aren't these creations coming up from a deep place inside of you? Like my sense, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, is you're not following a recipe book, or like you're not opening up one of those books and saying, oh, this halter top, I need to do this and that, and these are the knots, and this is the pattern. Correct? Is this coming from inside of you somewhere?
I mean, it is now. I think I followed. I mean, I always think you follow things and you learn them until you're comfortable doing that, and then you start exploring. And I'm not very good at following. Well, I am actually. I'm very good at following instructions, but I don't like it. I get a bit squirmy. I like to do my own my own take on things. But yeah, it's definitely gone off the chart now.
And so much fun to see. And I am about to be 50 years old, and I'm thinking I don't have a whole lot of place to be like wearing the halter top with the tassels, but oh, how much fun that would be. And especially the one in bamboo, just understanding, how soft bamboo is and how amazing that must feel to gently move and feel these tassels at your belly. And then it's just so tactile.
It's
And
beautiful to work with as a thread. I mean, it's so soft. It does feel like silk when you're sort of working with it and weaving with it and tying knots with it. And the beautiful thing with it is bamboo is sustainable, and that's why I use recycled threads. I use, I'm always looking for something that's a bit less draining on our resources and everything.
certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A good one.
So
Good find.
when you're picking up that thread, and because I'm also hearing, and I'm not even sure if it's on this list, but I'd like to add it. You're honoring Earth, and you're also honoring the resource by going to the recycled thread or going to the bamboo. So it feels to me, you can tell me if this is accurate, like a sort of prayer, and the activity and the contact with the material. And so can you bring us into a session and help us understand, like, what is that? Do you go to a place of quietude? Do you just let your thoughts flow as you're feeling? Like, what is it like to actually delve into a session of knot tying?
It is like once I'm kind of in the flow of something, it does very much feel like a meditation. And that's kind of what it is for me. I'm a quite fidgety person, and I have to be moving in some way in order to be still. And that's what offers to me, is just enough movement, just enough concentration, that it kind of quiets that monkey mind part of me that just drives me up the wall with the chitter chatter. And I just feel really calm. And the way it sort of comes about is always quite fun. It feels like there's a threshold. So it's like the tide coming in. Like I get the ideas, I get the inspiration, and I sort of gather the resources, whether it's sometimes if I want to make a wall hanging, I'll go to the beach, look for driftwood, or I'll go to the river and look for driftwood. And and then you sort of gather the right thread. And it takes a while. Like that whole process is quite long, and that can take months or, long, even over a year.
So you're
And
gestating. You're
yeah, yeah,
gestating.
absolutely, yeah. So it kind of builds, and then it gets to a point where I suddenly go, right, yeah, now's the time, and then I just start. So it kind of seems, people are always like, wow, you work so quickly, but stuff has been going around for quite a long time. So by the time, and I think a lot of creatives are like this, by the time it comes out, it just sort of flows, and it's
Almost
not
fully
always
formed at that point in time, right? Like,
yeah, kind of. The beginning part is, and then it's sort of a blur. Then I just sort of make it up as I go along, and that does involve, it's a bit of a laborious thing. It's probably not the most logical way to work, but I'll kind of make it up, and sometimes that involves I have to unpick things. So it's very much, it is such a meditation, and it is such a practice, because when it doesn't work, you have to deal with that frustration, and oh, I've wasted an hour, and then you're redoing it. But actually learning to sit with those emotions is just really healthy. It's a good thing to do.
so you on receiving the list of peace verbs from me, you added a couple of them, and one of them that you added was let go of being perfect and right. So
Oh
is
yeah.
that is this an example of that in real practice?
It is, yeah, yeah. I hadn't thought of it in that way, but it is, yeah, perfect. I mean, I was just saying the other day to someone, like my understanding of like art, being, an artist or being creative, is working with what you've got, and it's rarely perfect. It's about making the best of something. You sort of have ideas of how something will be, and with me, invariably, some bits of thread will be too short, some bits will get knotted, and you have to, do something else with them. But yeah, that perfection thing doesn't really work.
And isn't it funny that somehow humans, we have that concept? Like there is a human concept of perfectness, and how strange that is actually.
I think it probably comes from the brain, and that's the thing. It's not from our lived experience. It's from I don't know, some part of our brain that just sort of has this other.
Constantly
Yeah.
comparing, right? Comparing, is it that we're comparing a vision, whether it's something that we have internally, whether it's a vision that's being given to us from our surroundings, a vision to an execution or an executed reality?
On comparison, I think it's such a crippling thing on so many levels. Do you know what I mean? Like, even when I make things, if I spend too much time looking at things that other people make, suddenly I think my things are rubbish and they're not good enough, and I can't charge that, and I become like that. So yeah, comparison, that can be a dangerous thing if you're not in the right state of mind. If you've got if your mindset's not right, you can really tear yourself down with it. Whereas other forms of comparison, it can make you feel great. You sort of think, oh, mine looks as good as that, or I don't know.
So it's like a spice to be added judiciously. Like too much salt would ruin a meal, but just the right amount of salt is perfect.
Yeah, that's it. I like to be aware of my surroundings and aware of what other people are doing, and but yeah, I have to, and I find, particularly nowadays, because we have access to so much so quickly, like normally I don't know anyone else that does what I do.
Sure.
So it would be very difficult to compare to anything, but because I have the whole entire world on my phone.
Absolutely remarkable. Like you and I know each other, and that would have not happened without the internet. I mean, it might have, but that would have required one of us to take a really fun faraway vacation and then randomly run into each other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is also a business. And so I see you growing and stretching into new territory. So this started as lockdown creativity, self-expression, and is now in support of the ceremony of marriage, right? So I'm seeing hashtags related to weddings, and how lovely it is to put your prayer energy into that, and yet you are also learning the practical aspects of advertising and marketing and timing your creativity to someone else's due date.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's that's the part that's most difficult. It's because I just like making things.
Right.
And then all of the other stuff is really it's a lot. Yeah, it gets quite complicated, and having to network and having to push it all the time, because things don't just sell themselves. And I
Right.
really love my pieces. They've been in a couple of wedding ceremonies, and that feels really, really special. It's
Yeah.
like a
It,
gorgeous thing. It's part of someone's day. It's in their wedding photos. Like they're saying their vows. With that
oh,
as the backdrop. That is really, really special. But I still have to do the networking with the wedding venues, and
that's
I'm starting to do that. But yeah, I've
so I
not
just
managed.
want to give you a little shout out of encouragement, because like we mentioned earlier, wife, mom, employed person, artist, someone who needs to sleep and eat, and probably clean the house every once in a while, and also now you're marketer. You are now creator and marketer, so that's a lot. Congratulations on dipping your
Thank
toe
you.
into that and actually seeing the beginning of the fruitions of that.
It sounds more when you say
Yeah,
it.
right.
In my head, I'm like, oh, I really should have done that. Should, da, 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 all of the things. But yeah, it's a lot of plate spinning, a lot of different things going on.
Yeah, and so the other thing that I want to celebrate with you is that the joy, you exude joy. I'm not sure how aware you are of that, and but that is what I get from you when I see a post from you on your magic threads, and as I remember back into our Tree Sisters time, you exude joy, and also a real depth of connection to your own processes, and
Mm.
and I've seen that, like I said, for all these years now. Um, could we shift gears and talk about healing?
Yeah, yeah.
So as I was getting to know you along with other tree sisters, you were in a slower time in your life. I remember there was a sensation of dropping down and maybe
Mm.
spending time with the ancestors. And I think you live in a place where you can actually do that physically. Like there's places to go walking and there's stones to be able to sit on and touch, and
Mhm.
rivers that would have nourished your people thousands of years ago that you can still put your hands in that water. And can you tell us about your feeling the illness coming on and your diagnosis and you're moving through that process, and it's a lot, and but I think very encouraging how you moved through it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just the most immense amount of, I suppose you call it synchronicity or whatever you want to call it, but things that became aligned just before I got really ill. So just before I don't know which part to start in. Anyway, diagnosed with breast cancer, a very aggressive one, in the January of whatever it was, 2018.
And you were
But
in your mid 30s at that point?
I was 37.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
so the kids were quite young, they were like 11 and 9 or something like that. But we just moved to Tavistock to be near Dartmoor, because I'd started doing this incredible body of work with a lady that I'd met, Denise, which was very much about earth connection and connection to ourselves, connection to our environment. And it was all based on Dartmoor. And I was
Hmm.
like, I need to live near Dartmoor. I just need to be near that land.
And
So
for
we
those of us who don't
went,
live in the UK, can you tell us a
oh
little bit
yeah,
about what Dartmoor is?
forget, yeah.
When, like, what first? Let's start with what is a moor, and what is a dart?
Okay, so Dartmoor is it's 365 square miles of moorland, and moorland is, there's tours which are sort of huge quartz, sort of crystalline, sort of granite.
Hmm.
They look like structures, but they're just basically bedrock that's been exposed because
Oh wow.
they're a shallow sea. So it's quite remarkable. You've got these tours which just jut out. I mean, if I really encourage anyone, just Google image search it, because
Hmm.
there's not many places like it on this earth. And then in between, there are beautiful rivers and valleys, and there's forests, and a lot of it's probably very overgrazed. So a lot of the moorland is just bracken and grass.
Is bracken a shrub or
Like
a
a fern.
bramble?
It's a fern.
It's
It's
a
like a tiny
fern.
fern. Yeah. and they sort of grow up to probably like nearly chest height. They get really high. Over the winter there's nothing, so you can walk anywhere, and then it gets to the summer and now it's just all, you know, there's
Wow.
through it, but
Yeah.
it's different landscape.
Wow.
And then there's lots of boggy parts. It's a very, very wet part of the world.
Mm.
So a
Hmm.
lot of rain. And it's beautiful because within Dartmoor, within the centre of Dartmoor, is the sort of origins of most of these huge rivers that sort of are around this area. You know,
Hmm.
it's a pivotal kind of central place. Yeah.
Wow. So it's like a high flat land from
Really high,
whence
yeah.
the rivers are born and then go out through. And what part of England are you in? Southwest, north,
The southwest, yeah,
southwest?
southwest, down in Devon. So we're sort of near the little bit, the little pointy bit that kind of comes out.
Hmm.
So the, yeah.
And so you're close enough to the sea that you can go there in a day trip and you're
It's about, yeah, probably about 50 minutes away. Well, this time of year we get lots of tourists, so it can be a lot longer than that.
sure, sure, but in a non-trafficy time,
In traffic time, yeah.
about an hour to get there. So you
Mhm.
had just moved to this
Mhm.
beautiful, highly how am I going to put this? It's just a spiritual place, right? You've moved to this spiritual place,
Really
beautiful nature,
grounding, incredibly
grounding.
grounding. That's what it does for me, is it just draws, like, it draws me down. It takes me out of my sort of brain into my body and into a more sort of peaceful place. Yeah.
So you had found your way here with your whole family.
Hmm. Yeah, which was a big thing. You know, they had to take the kids out of the school they were in and move schools, and it's a longer commute for my husband. And this is where the great irony comes in. This bit always really tickles me. Is like, I was working as a reflexologist at the time, and my sort of work was around healing, and you know, I really understood a lot about nutrition and well-being. And I was like, oh, I'm going to move to Tavistock, and I want, you know, I can do talks, and I want to be sort of known as someone that does that kind of work in the
Hmm,
town, and just really look after myself. So kind of my well-being speaks for itself. And
sure.
then getting cancer, going through chemo, and losing all my hair and looking like, you know, a corpse for about a year. So,
Oh my gosh.
so the irony of that plan still tickles me, and I've got a very dark sense of humor. So it, yeah, that was a, yeah, definite
So
change of plans.
so I've got my piece list up here on the wall that I'm looking at, but it's also here in front of me. And where is it? Use humor.
Mm-hmm.
Use humor. Use humor. That's a piece verb.
Always. Humor has seen me through like the darkest times of my life, and it isn't just my own sort of, you know, experience of cancer and all that treatment, which was harrowing and awful and challenging, but also wonderful, weirdly, at certain points. But you know, we've had a lot happen in my family, and it's just so many different traumas of so many different kinds, and always humor is
Hmm.
one of the gifts that sort of like helps get
Mhm.
through. And my family, we just, it's something that we do, and I'm really lucky to have that as a tool.
So can we pick that apart a little bit? Because humor can be different things, but is it about irony? Is it about silliness? Like, can you give us an example of something funny or like a way that you've used humor to get yourself through a moment?
So the one that really, really sticks out to me was, oh, and I can still feel this. It's still quite a sort of weird bodily thing when I think about chemo, because it is so,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, it's so rooted in my body. It has a weird effect on me. But this was while I was going through chemo, and oh God, I've been having it for months already. So I was feeling really starting to get quite, you just start getting ground down with it, and you know you have to do it, but it's like,
Right. It's that poison that heals.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very strange experience, all of it. But
Yeah.
there came a point, I went in one day, and there was two really profound lessons actually. The first one was the nurse that was doing it that day just wasn't present with me, and she
Mm.
wouldn't look me in the eye. Like,
Wow.
all of the others were amazing. You know, they're such fantastic nurses, really couldn't fault them. This lady wouldn't look me in the eye. She was very sort of matter of fact, you know, sat down, and it was a bit like paint by numbers, you know, here you go,
Right.
and the
And I like, I'm cringing because I'm understanding like this is something that's going into your vein, and for someone to be like,
it's in your hand, not even in your
oh,
eye.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, so they were putting the thing into the vein at the hand, and I don't want to go too many details anyway, but she basically botched it up. I told her she was
oh,
botching. I'd had so many needles in me by this point. I can tell
yeah,
someone, and I'm like, that's not right. And she was just ignoring me, which was really not helping. And I went into the first full blown panic attack that I think I've ever had. So
right,
I kind of this horrible sort of meltdown thing.
right,
And long story short, I got out of that because I'm very, I'm single minded. If I want to do something, and I wanted it, even though I didn't want chemo, I did want it. So I got over that, and then we went into a side room, and some different nurses came through, and these nurses were just awesome, and they were funny, and it was that silliness. And the thing that worked in the end was like there was this one nurse who apparently had a reputation for being like a sort of needle ninja. She was amazing. She'd just sit in, like no matter how tricky, she'll do it. So they brought her in, and then the other nurse was stood there as well. And I don't know how it all happened, but she ended up doing some kind of like movement that was a bit like a dance. And I was like, oh, you're doing a rain dance. And I was like, oh, no, you're doing a vein dance. And we were just, and it doesn't sound that funny now, but when you're kind of like in this the real environment and it's so medical, and to have
yeah,
people and have that lightness and silliness, and you just really connect through
yeah.
humor. Just,
Yes. So there's
yeah.
allowing yourself to like, you brought in the verb dance, right? Which is also a piece verb, and allowing silliness as a part of the movement, right? And also that the recognition of her skill, but also like just bringing it into this moment that no one really wants to be here in this moment, right? They don't want to be cancer nurses any more than you want to be a cancer patient, but here you are having this silly connection, and that lifts the mood and then carries you through. Yeah.
Mhm. And it did, and it worked. We were laughing. I mean, I bet everyone else on the ward was just thinking, "What is what is going on in that room?" So we were like, and just really, really laughing, and it worked. It was like the fourth or fifth attempt. Very honestly, so many nurses. It was
Oh my
just,
goodness. I'm just like
but it
rubbing my
worked.
own hand, and
No, I'm sorry. I'm really probably grimming out lots of people right now,
no,
but
no. I mean, I just like in solidarity with you. I'm
which is so beautiful because now I work with my hands. That's it's yeah,
yeah.
like it's healing, but yeah, and there's lots of examples, but that's the one that always felt like the most profound thing to me. It's like, wow, in the midst of like this absolute horror, if I hadn't found my humor in that moment, I would have gone home and I wouldn't have come back. I wouldn't
Oh
have
my
gone back to
goodness.
the ward, and that would have been the end of my chemo, and it would have been premature. So would my chemo have worked? Would I still be here now? Who knows?
Amazing. A watershed moment. So humor is, it's finding your inner strength is what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
And going back to joy. So, as I mentioned before, Lisa, you exude joy. And of course, I'm sure, not at all moments because none of us could, but you do come back to that.
yeah. I'm like, well, I'm on good form.
Right.
There's other moments of definite rage and lots of other things, but
But
um,
but anger, also expressing anger is, it's a piece verb. It's on the wall over here, be angry. So
okay.
how important that is to allow that as well.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. But that was, I'd say, with that use of like humor, and that was something that stayed with me, and it's something that I've said to people that I work with. But your ability to sort of contain opposites is
Hmm.
so important. Just because you're going through something awful, or because you have grief, or because things are overwhelming, doesn't mean you can't have pockets of joy. It doesn't matter what other people think or how that looks, because I was really aware of that to start with. Like, oh, what if I'm happy too much and everyone thinks I'm okay? I really don't feel okay. I don't want everyone
Right.
to think I'm okay.
Right.
And then I got over that and was just like, do you know what? I just am how I am. And,
And
sometimes I'm happy and sometimes I'm weeping inconsolably. It's just,
right, right. And so the difference between happiness as a, are you there still?
oh,
Oh, there
yeah.
you are. You jumped out for a moment. Um, the difference between happiness, like as a temporary state, versus joy, like it feels to
Mm,
me like joy is coming from a deeper
Mm.
it's like a wellspring of life energy, which is, I think, different than happiness, which feels more like a state.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right. Yeah, joy is definitely, I don't know, yeah. I don't even know how to describe it, but yeah, something that moves much more fluid emotion, and it has to be allowed, just like grief has to be allowed. You have to
Mm.
have internal permission to be a certain way. And obviously, it expresses itself in different ways. And I use humor a lot. Sometimes people get that, sometimes they don't. It's just,
And
yeah.
I see you give yourself permission, and so here I am over in California, USA, watching you from afar, and I remember as you realized, okay, I'm going into chemo. At that point, your hair was down all the way
Oh,
down your waist, right?
yeah, yeah.
So you had, which is an accomplishment. You'd grown your hair really long,
Mhm.
and I'm sure that was a part of your expression and sense of self. And so
Mhm.
then you decided, because you knew you were going to have to lose the hair, why not raise some money? Why not
Mhm.
have a celebration? Why not be a mother punker for a little while? Um, and so then you went punk rock, and you went to the pub, which I think I'm not alone in America, in the American community, of being very jealous of the British pub culture. It's like, what a wonderful thing to be able to come together
Mhm.
in a public house, and that's part of the neighborhood and community. And so you had to tell us about that. Tell us about that moment.
Yeah, I mean, oh God, that's another good use of joy and humour. And that was, oh, just my amazing friend Sarah, and actually it was her dad's pub, Mike. But we cracked up I don't know how we came to this plan. It just, I was talking about losing my hair, and as always, I was sort of like, how can I make this less traumatic for everybody around me?
Yeah, your kids included, right? Your husband included.
Pivotal, like particularly with them, because I've seen other people go through chemo, and I've seen the hair on the pillow, like I just didn't want any of that.
Mhm.
And then suddenly I was like, oh, do you know what? I've always really wanted to my hair. I've always wanted a mohawk. And I was like, wow, now isn't the time to do that. And I don't know when it is. And so I sort of ran the idea past my friend, and she was like, yeah, do it, do it. She's like so kind of like enthusiastic. And then I think it's her sort of was like, well, why don't you hold we can do it at my dad's pub, and then it was like, well, it can be a fundraiser. If I'm going down, I'm taking everyone with me. Like I need to make it so large. So, and it did. It raised like, oh God, I can't remember what it was. It was something like 2,500, 3,000 or something for Tree Sisters, and another 1,000 for Macmillan, which is the cancer nurses, and then another 1,000
Wow.
for the Princess Trust. Um,
So did you sell tickets? Like, how did this work?
so they were amazing at the pub. They ran a raffle. So that was one thing. They ran this raffle, and people had donated, like drink and different things. And so he sold loads of raffle tickets. And then it was just through the network of people that I know. And it was, yeah, like a sponsored head shave, really. And I don't know, yeah, everyone was just so generous and so supportive. And it was just so much fun. It was
So
so much fun.
was this the first? I mean, because I've seen you do a series of creative fundraisers. Was this your first one?
That was the first one, yeah. So yeah, since then I rack my brain every year to think of different things to do.
Yeah, and so here you are. You're at the doorway to a descent.
Mm.
And I remember before you got the diagnosis, there was a moment in time where you wrote a poem while
Mm.
sitting on the moor, maybe near a tour or on a tour, about dropping deep.
Hmm.
And then one of our other friends turned it into a song, which was amazing too.
That was beautiful. Yeah.
And so you know you're on this descent. You know that you're going to be facing these challenges, and yet you counterbalance that with this silly celebratory. And by the way, you looked so beautiful. Like you can do that mohawk. Like, not, I don't think everybody can, but you just had the look down, and so this like beautiful Lisa, this like shining Lisa, with the mohawk.
Yeah.
going up, raising funds, the community's coming around, and it's a community building event. And then as you're descending, so there's something about that balance. You were talking about balance before.
Yeah. You've just reminded when you're saying about the head shave and how it suited me. And like my dad said something to me, which was just honest, I could have just wept. But again, it was with my parents and my brother. You know, I didn't want people to be really worried for me. But he
Yeah.
said when he saw me there, and when she was like shaving the head, he said, I felt like I could see you. I could
Oh,
actually see you, you know.
wow.
And he absolutely, even my dad, like loved it. It was like that. Just
And
it's
I'm
you, you
I'm
know.
imagining your dad wasn't a punk rocker back in his 20s. He
No,
thought,
he was a mod. He was a mod, so he wasn't a punk rocker. He was a
what's a mod?
mod. They went around on the mopeds and a very I don't know how to describe them. Just yeah, they were different groups, and there were
Different group.
mods
Yeah.
and rockers and punks, and so
So it wasn't
mm,
like he's like, that's my girl, she's following after her old man. No, that he could somehow, there's something about that moment where he saw your soul, maybe
yeah,
something about,
I think it did just let go. It just sort of with that beauty and support of that many people, you know,
mm.
around me, it just released. It was just really beautiful. Yeah, I felt very spoiled, felt very indulgent. Just the funny thing, people going, "Wow, it's an amazing thing you've done." I'm thinking that was the most self-indulgent thing I've ever done. Felt
Wow,
really
but I think there's something to that because to there I think it's prevalent in modern culture to not be self-indulgent, and yet it's something about that self-care that comes back to the joy that then gives permission and creates a like let's all do this together, let's all find our joy together. So it was a really heartwarming, uplifting, like again, here I am thousands of miles away feeling the glow from that and the beauty of that. So not selfish. That's what's interesting about it,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah. And like you say, and it was from then. It was a deep dive because then, for you know, it's taken me until almost this point now, which is 4 years on and a bit, to become myself again. I mean, it really
Yeah.
it pared back everything. I felt whittled back to the absolute sort of core of who I was. I was functioning on a really different level. So it's kind of it was almost like going out with fireworks. It's like, you know, I'm going under, right? So here we go. And then
Yeah.
although I did still through the sort of Tree Sisters through the because this was the beautiful side of social media through the sort of inner journey group that we had, which was this quite large like Facebook group with about 1,000
Thousands of
on it.
people
Yeah.
observing and maybe hundreds of people
Yeah,
participating.
yeah. But through that time, I've met so many beautiful people, and they're still my friends now through Facebook, and we speak and we, you know, just support each other. And yeah, it was really quite a precious. You know, there's a lot of gifts in that time. Not that I sort of wish it on anyone, but it, you know.
Right. Right. The depth of it and the
Mm,
support of it and the synchronicity. You know, when you started telling the story, you talked about the synchronicity of
yeah.
events and connections.
Hmm. Well, that's it. You know, finding literally it was that year earlier that year that I'd found Tree Sisters. So that holding, you know, that felt like yeah, I felt very held by that,
Mm.
and that was a really good way for me to communicate because I largely wasn't able to go out. I wasn't going out in my community anymore very much because I couldn't walk very far just with
You
absolutely
basically had your own personal lockdown, right? Like, so your lockdown
yeah,
started
yeah, yeah.
earlier.
Mm-hmm. Also, I just noticing my battery things flying. I think I'll be all right for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So just yeah, lots of things aligned before, and for me, I just have to mention her because she's just absolutely phenomenal. But I worked with a lady, Denise. Earth Dances is the name of her. I don't know what you call it.
Your
Online
business?
presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, business thing that she does. But yeah, just and that involved also with a circle of women that I was working with doing really deep work. And I just started that a few months before, and I managed to carry that on all through that year that I was absolutely annihilated, and it just lined up perfectly. You know, I'd have like because you committed for a year basically, and there were so many meetings where you'd go away, and it was like a residential kind of retreat. You'd be away for a couple of days with this same group of women, and it just all aligned in this most perfect way that, you know, sometimes I'd be in hospital, but then 2 days later I'd be off on retreat, or I don't know, it seemed to work out. Somehow I managed to do that all the way through, which kept me open and kept me grounded and, you know, kept me sane.
You mentioned, you know, when you gave me back the couple of piece verbs to add to the list, witness. So I have noticed you be witnessed as a piece verb, that you have, I mean, I've been in the circle, you know, witnessing you along with other people, but you mentioned witnessing. So in your women's circles, what is that like to witness?
It's beautiful. Again, it just feels like a gift, and it feels like something that I'm able to offer, and I'm still working at it. It's still a practice, but it's this ability to kind of quiet yourself and be there to witness another and not fix them, not be thinking in your head what you could say next, or what's a clever thing to say, or what would, you know, like actually just allow people to unfold in their own way and discover their own wisdom. And it is a practice, you know, and I totally haven't nailed it yet because my monkey mind comes all the time with like ideas and, you know, thoughts and stuff. But to witness women, it's a beautiful thing, and it can be a really difficult, challenging thing, you know, if someone's really upset or grieving or whatever they're going through, because naturally, you know, there's ways that we act within our culture, you know, and normally if someone's upset, you hug them, or you sort of tell them it's okay, or you give those kind of platitudes or comforts. But to just witness, actually there's no just about it, to witness someone,
Right, there's no just about it, exactly. Yeah.
and actually allow them to be upset, because the strange thing is, and I've felt this for myself, the moment someone goes to give you comfort, basically they're almost telling you implicitly, I'm not comfortable with how you're being right now, I need to make this better. Whereas if you just give someone space and you're still there for them, you're still, you know, you're giving them your presence, it does something different. And I think there's a fear with some people that they might just implode or explode, or they'll never crying, you know,
Right.
but that's not what happens. It's like a wave, you know, and it can be a joy wave or a grief wave, or you know,
it
ecstatic.
moves.
It moves.
It moves. And when you say a wave, implicit to that is the peaks and the troughs, and somehow that there's an undulation to it. And when you, so a few things that were coming to mind with my monkey brain while I was witnessing. Something about being able to ground. So you're talking about the women's group and your friend, it's Denise, yes? So
Yeah.
she held a space for you, right? She was holding a space, and sometimes that was actually a physical space, but in a lot of ways that was the witnessing, energetic space. And my experience with that rush to come in and put the arms around and to say, oh, it's okay, is about the recipient, the witnesser, not being grounded in a way that they can allow that wave of energy to come and then ground through them. And yet if there's that grounding practice, so you moved to the Dartmoor area, so you found this healer who holds space in a way that's connected with earth, and a holding circle, which is another really important noun, the circle. And so then learning how to, and being in the practice of witnessing as a way to ground and receive, and somehow in that transmute and allow the motion, like the you know, the word emotion, right, there's contains motion, and yet often the more difficult ones get stuck, or even the not so difficult. We're talking about joy and having to give permission to joy, and somehow allowing the unsticking has a lot to do with bearing witness, or having someone bear witness.
And I think it comes through experience. Once you've experienced how it feels to be witnessed in that way, through that practice and your own sort of allowing yourself to be vulnerable in that way, you know, then you can offer that So it's a thing that I've learned and I'm still learning and practiced, and it's simple, powerful stuff. And part of within Treatise is what we call sistering, is exactly that, that practice of witnessing someone else and not, that ability to not absorb their emotions, because quite on, we talk a lot about empathy, and people sometimes really feel someone else, and that can almost be a block. That's making it about them rather than the person who's actually going through.
Right.
I don't know if I'm getting this out right, but
But there's a nuance there.
Yeah.
There's a subtlety and nuance there, and one of them closes a door to healing, and the other one opens the door to healing.
Yeah. But it feels really edgy because you don't know what's coming next. If you give someone a hug and they stop crying, then you kind of know you'd be all right for a bit. If you're just letting someone kind of get into a rage, or they're sort of like upset about something or whatever it is, it's kind of feels more like, woo, where we go.
Right. It's you don't know what's coming next, and you don't know how long it's going to last, and you don't know whether you're going to be able to hold that grounding space. And so there's a lot of finding and holding healthy boundaries in that, because I'm sure that as you were moving through that experience, if you noticed you didn't have the energy for it that particular day, how important it would be to pull back.
Yeah. And that is why, I suppose, because I haven't had much energy. I had COVID like 4 months ago, and then I had this horrible fatigue. I was off work for 3 months, so I'm kind of just coming out of this like swamp of feeling really low energy, and so I've been holding circle in a sort of different way, I suppose, and much boundaried way, because I was like, well, I just can't go there. And and in my work as well with mental health, it's all the same. It's just it's a word that keeps coming back quite a lot, is boundaries.
Right. And and then part of that is practicing right timing as well. And so I remember being in contact with you as you were coming out of the chemo. And so you're looking at, wow, I think I'm healthy. I'm healthy for now. I have this opportunity to start life again. And then there being a pause moment rather than a rush moment is what I recall from you. And the importance of, you're talking about you were sick and off work for 3 months, and just this concept of allowing there to be pause points rather than go 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 go.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what has been enforced on me rather than having chosen it. It's just, I seem to have quite a few pause moments. Which is funny. I find it really frustrating. I suppose most recently found it really frustrating because I got COVID in March, which is like spring, and the spring's coming and all the energy filling up, and I want to be doing the gardening, and I've got all these creative ideas, and I was just in bed all the time, sort of feeling half alive, and that wasn't fun. But again, there's gifts in it because I've come out of it and I had a lot of time to think. So there's a lot went on in that time. There's a lot brewing.
The gestating, the downtime for gestation. Wow, Lisa, there's so much. I just want to see if there's any that I really was hoping to touch base with you on. I just want to give a shout out to the word. I think we've been talking about it throughout, but that's play. Definitely notice you playing and being playful, and seems like a lot of that has to do with the giving permission. And so there's a few examples of this. Like I remember another fundraiser you did after that first one involved dressing in a tree bathing suit. So like
running into the sea.
Going into the sea. Like what was it, January, sometime really cold?
New Year's Day.
It was January.
It was cold.
So that's, oh gosh, that brings us to a few other peace verbs. Spending time with the water. Moving, So you do it seems to have you do seem to have a habit or a practice of swimming in cold water.
Yeah, and that's I mean, that helped me through recovering from cancer. It helped me most recently recovering from the fatigue, and I stupidly kind of forgotten about it until I was sort of went for a little walk with my husband down by the River Dart, right in the middle of the moors, and I had a bit of a breakdown basically because I just felt so rubbish and got to that point where I was just like, I'm never going to get over this. You know, it's going to be chronic fatigue. I'm going to feel like
Oh,
this forever.
yeah.
And got really upset. And I was about to storm back to the car, and my husband was like, just come and sit down for a minute. So we went and sat next to the river, and I was sat there just feeling absolute despair. And suddenly I was like, I had this urge, and this is me playing. I was like, I just really wanted to stick my head in the river. You know, but that's what I did. I went and stuck my head in, and then I was like, I need to get in the river. So I just sort of stripped off, got in the river. You know, my husband's great. He's just like supports, he knows just how, yeah, quirky, shall we say, I can be. So I
For
just
sure.
did that. And then I was like, that feels amazing. And I had this buzz. I was like, I feel alive again. So I need to
But
do
like,
this.
wait, sorry, I need to interrupt you because for the some people listening are not will not have experienced what it is to jump into cold water. And so it's can we talk about the shock? Can we talk about the physical sensation and like surprise of that?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't literally jump in. I kind of walk in slowly, trying not to swear too loudly and shout, especially if there's people walking their dogs. I try and rein it in, but it feels, it's almost like fire. It's really like the colder the water is, you know, when you've been in, it's bizarre. It feels cold as you get in, and then once you're in, it feels fine, you know. And that's
Ah,
almost the worrying thing. If you're in the middle of the winter and it's actually really cold, you can start to feel fine, but that's a sign that you're probably going hypothermic, so you need to get out. But when you get out, your skin feels, you can feel like every nerve ending, and it feels
and
like fire.
you
It's
see
just
the blood at the surface of your skin too, don't you? Don't you turn a little pink?
go a funny sort of color. Yeah, yeah. I can't remember what the hue was, but yeah, in the winter you kind of get out and your skin's just like, yeah, lobster kind of pink. And you can see, or if you haven't gone the full way into the water, you'll have like a tide line of you know where you, how far you can. um
Wow.
but it just feels extraordinary, and it feels, I've described to people before saying it's like a crash course in mindfulness, because you can't be anywhere else. You're not worrying about, you know, things that happened last week when suddenly your body's going like you just have to concentrate on keeping breathing and
Yeah.
moving, you know. It's, yeah,
And your
it's
body really does do that, doesn't it? Like
yeah. And I would say anyone sort of thinking about doing it, always do it with other people, and do it
sure,
with other people who know what they're doing.
for
And,
safety.
you know, for safety, yeah, because it
Yeah.
is, you know, rivers can be really dangerous, the sea can be incredibly dangerous, and
Right, right. Especially if you do go into that hyperthermia or shock or like any of those things, you need someone to say, "Oh, time to pull that person out."
yeah, yeah.
But you know, we've been talking about your peace verbs, but I want to do a little shout out to your husband's peace verbs. A couple of them um, resonate with me and my husband as well. But there's hold down the fort. That's an expression we use here in America. I don't know if you know that expression.
No, I've not heard that.
Okay, so in our rather dubious history over here, there have been forts,
Mhm.
as in like military compounds. And
Yeah,
so the expression to hold down the fort is basically to protect the home and to
okay.
keep things
Yeah.
moving and functioning while the other person has to go out and maybe not be able to participate in that. And
Mhm.
so I want to applaud, you know, your husband for holding down the fort
Oh, yeah.
through through the time periods that you were not
Mhm.
able to co-participate in that with
Mhm.
him through your sickness. So here's a cheer to your husband for holding down the fort.
Go, Matt.
Now here's another cheer to him because and my husband has to do this frequently. When one has a goofy wife, one has to allow and also play the straight man to the like is like in the genre of comedy when there's two comedians. There's
Mhm.
the one that does the outlandish thing, while the
Mhm.
other one just uh, plays straight or you know so like it's a little bit of like bearing witness to the goofiness. And so I believe that in a moment like that when you're you're both using the humor. You're at the river. He says, sit down by the river. And then you say to him, I need to strip my clothes off and go in the river. And you mentioned dog walking.
Yes, it's
So
quite a busy, it's a busy place. I mean, it wasn't anyone there at that particular moment, but
so something tells me that your husband has been with you for not just a few years to be able to be like,
20
okay,
20 years,
I will watch out for the
20
dog
years.
walkers
Yeah.
while you jump in the river. So
Yeah.
yeah, that I don't know if I have a particular verb for that, but something about being willing to be the partner of the goofball.
Yeah. He's very patient.
Right. Right. I had a moment. I sew, but rather ridiculously, and that's been a 20-year journey for me. And we went on vacation recently, somewhere very sunny in the desert, and I needed sun protection. And so I had this fabric, sun protection fabric, and I sewed a cape that should not have seen the public, and yet it did. I have some photographs. So anyhow, here we were in Sedona, Arizona, which is a highly touristy place, on a hike, going up a cliff, scrambling, and I was wearing the cape, and we were getting all sorts of stares, and yet here he was, right there with me. Anyhow, so I think you could probably relate. You're in a swimsuit, which is already a sensation of being exposed, right? But it's not just a swimsuit; it's a tree swimsuit, and you're down, at the beach and jumping in the water. And anyhow,
Painted green as well.
painted green. Right.
Partially green with a very nice. Yeah, what you do.
And so that was a fundraiser for Tree Sisters, is that right?
Yeah, that was. And the most recent one, I mean, talk about playing, was I did one for Trevi, which is it supports women in my local city, Plymouth, women that have had like multiple disadvantages and awful things, traumas and whatnot, and they support them through Women's Centre and through mother and baby units. So I fundraised for them for my birthday this year by doing a tree hugathon. So
I remember that too. Yeah.
Every £5 you donate, I'll hug a tree, and I ended up having to hug like hundreds of trees, but it was really fun. Yeah,
and so that's the other piece for Lisa, of spending time with trees.
I did a lot of time with trees. Yeah, on an obsessive amount, I'd say.
Yeah, and the energy exchange that happens in the hugging of a tree is a real thing. Yeah.
Oh, they are. I mean, I my kids, everyone sort of tolerates my ways, but I do. I don't know. I just feel that things have everything. They're living beings, and they have a presence, and they have an energy, and I do sort of talk to trees. Not usually massively out loud, but I do.
I talk to trees massively out loud when I feel permission.
Yeah.
And is it similar for you? So
particularly, I mean, I do. I feel like I'm fessing up, but like when I'm driving to work, I drive through beautiful valleys, and there's trees. You get these like tree tunnels where the trees are all just over the road and meeting at the top, and they're so beautiful. So every time I drive through there, I'm kind of just looking around, just telling everything how beautiful it is, and I think, well, doesn't matter if that seems crazy or whatever it seems. It's a nicer thing to think than sort of listening to the radio and worrying about the news. I'm just there just going, wow.
So you're expressing gratitude. You're feeling and expressing gratitude. That's also on my list of peace verbs for you.
There you go. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's this as well, isn't it? I mean, you just have to remind ourselves. I think most people do it when kind of prompted, but we just forget to be grateful,
Yeah. And how being grateful, the act of being grateful is similar to the act of using humor, in that it can transform a dark moment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's like alchemy, isn't it? I mean, it's a simple thing, but a shift of, it's just change of the light, isn't it? Or it's just a different way of looking at things, and we can do that. That's part of the gift of being human, is just that ability to change how you see things. But
and to maybe prompt, it sounds like you have a habit too, like there's something about practicing and developing habits, which are like repetition
Mm.
of a behavior. And so I've seen you, or in this conversation, I've heard you mentioning um, looking for the bright side of it, or so you got COVID, and you could have gone down the rabbit hole, right? But you said there were gifts there, and so to see the gifts, you would have had to actually had the habit of looking for them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is that it's giving your brain something to do. Like, look for the good
Ah,
thing. You're not
ah.
looking for the good things. What are you looking at? What are you paying attention to? And that doesn't mean that I get it right all the time. I'm a very ranty person. My kids are just, I drive them up the wall, because I do just offload and rant about things quite a lot. But yeah, also look for the good, and I look for the good in people. I look for the good in situations. Just it feels very easy to kind of go down negative pathways. I don't know. I think it's an evolutionary thing. We've survived. We've got to this point of existing because we're very good at spotting things that might harm us, or things that aren't quite right. We're really,
Right,
really honed at that.
right.
But that is a gift, but it's also a complete pain in the butt, because it just it plays out, and
But even in describing it, even in characterizing it as you did, you're already turning it on its positive head, because you could just say it's
yeah.
an illness we all have, or it's a detriment to our human capacity, or like you could have described it like that, but you actually said, no, wait, it's actually an evolutionary tool. It's a way of staying safe. So even in that way of talking about it is
And
already starting to
picking
lift it
the
up.
positive.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah, there you go. But that's what you do, is just training your brain, and accepting that you don't always get it right. Definitely, you can be really negative. I can be really negative sometimes. And
But isn't that also important, because isn't that also allowing the place where you are, rather than it's like not being your own there Russian to hugger, right?
Mhm.
If you were rushing in to hug and smother all of your negative emotions, you would be
Mhm.
that same person to yourself, right?
Mhm. Yeah, just all like you said earlier, everything's balance. It's just, yeah, trying to find what that balance is for yourself, which is different, and you won't see it in anyone else, and that's what makes it so difficult. You can't mimic those things. You just have to find your own way. And I always say this, like, working in the job that I work in, I don't advise people. I'll kind of, if they want help, I'll tell them some things that have worked for me.
Hmm.
The beautiful part of my job, because I'm a peer support worker, so I get to talk about my own mental health challenges. I can be very open, and I can say things that have helped for me. I can say things that help other people, but at the end of the day, they've got to try it for themselves. And
So
oh,
that there's something really profound about offering oneself to be witnessed, which is what you're describing here. So you're talking about your own journey,
mhm,
and also your imperfections and challenges,
mhm,
and that, yeah, recognizing that that is uh, informative, but that also every other human being must find their own, must,
mm,
and how, but yet how critically important it is that we do have those other examples around us. Like,
mm,
can you imagine having gone through this journey without anyone, without just one person saying, let
mm.
me give you a window into my own frailty or my own struggles?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the beauty as well. Like, just, yeah, the weirdly, the more sort of vulnerable I allowed myself to be, and because I didn't have the energy to like hold up any masks anymore, so
Oh,
I was
right.
completely myself.
Yeah,
Probably the most me that I've ever been.
yeah.
And as I did that, other people, it gave them permission. Like, I don't know. I think it inspired other people to be. Sounds really cheesy, but like to be more like themselves, and because I don't know, just offered. There was a truth there. There was like a real truth and rawness, and that's what happens when you go through a trauma of any description, or any kind of life-changing event. It just, yeah, it can be quite profound. I'm still feeling the ripples of it now. I
Hmm.
mean, you sort of try and work stuff out and think, what did that mean? And I still do, I used to get really annoyed at people that would say, oh, there's a gift in it, and I'd get really angry, because I'd just be like, horrible. Like what I'm going through is horrible. There's no gifts. This is just, you know, give me things in a good way. If life wants to teach me something, teach me a lesson, and let me win the lottery and discover what it is to be generous. Why do I have to go through this horror? But
Yeah. And so there's something about timing there too, right? Because if it's not the right time to look for the gift, and it's really the timing is really about wallowing in the upsetness, wallow in
absolutely.
the
Oh
upsetness.
God, it's self-pity. Like I just dug the biggest pit of like self-pity. It was just, yeah, I went through a lot of poor me.
And yet, isn't that so important? Because if you don't allow for that, isn't it somewhere still inside of us if we don't allow for the expression of it?
Yeah, and it still comes out. It's just, it's there, and it comes out all the time, like little bits. I'm just aware of it. Yeah.
And I think that speaks to how energy moves in waves. And so if
Mm.
there were the event that you're still feeling the self-pity about years later, that there's something about the energy moving in a wave and catching up with you at that moment, and the peaks and the troughs.
Mhm.
And of course there could be new traumas or new reasons to be in that
Mhm.
place of self-pity, but
Mhm.
something about allowing for, oh, here we are again. uh,
Yeah.
we're not done yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I see it like a spiral. Someone pointed this out the other day, actually. I think
Mm,
it was at one of the women's circles. But sometimes you kind of meet things. So again, the most recent irony being, I literally just had a conversation with one of my colleagues at work about how being tired really triggers me. Like it leads to kind of quite poor mental health. I get very anxious,
yeah.
really low. I can get very sort of derogatory towards myself. I just, if I'm tired, my resources aren't good. And then I got COVID, then I had 4 months of fatigue. So it was like, oh, here's
Oh my
life.
goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just sort of like, here's my kryptonite. And then life just
Yeah.
went, right, have it. And rather than sort of see it as like, oh, I failed, I've come back to this point, I feel like this again. Someone said, well, it's like a spiral. It kind of
Yeah.
feels back where you were, but
Yeah.
bird on the thermals, you're higher. Something's different. It
Higher
might.
and also deeper, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, it's a great cosmic spiral of stuff.
I was just like, I was just having a little moment of humor when you said that. It was like a great cosmic spiral of coming back to that same crap. But yet,
Yeah, there's another S word. What did you come out there?
and yet still being able to notice and recognize, oh, okay, I'm there again, but I'm not actually there again.
Yeah, that's it. This feels the same, but it isn't the same. And I'm really, really lucky. Again, my partner, my husband's really supportive. And at points where I thought I'd gone back to how I was a couple of years ago, like mentally, I was just feeling really, really unwell, not good. It was just draining me. And yeah, reminding me this isn't the same. What you're feeling now, this isn't 3 years ago. This is now. And it's a
Yeah.
different thing. And you're gonna get through it. It's just, yeah, you just have to
Wow.
deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And allow it to be there in that
Hmm.
day.
Yeah,
So
easier for them.
if you don't mind,
Hmm.
this reminds me of a very personal name that you gave yourself, which is River. Do you still
Mm,
think of yourself that way?
I do, and I kind of have a funny journey with River, and I don't know what it means, but it's just a name that feels more appropriate, I suppose, particularly when I'm in ceremony or when I'm sort of doing any kind of deep work. That feels like something of the nature of who I am or what I am. I don't
Well,
even know. It's really difficult to describe. So it's
can I
not a
talk a
name.
little bit? Sorry to interrupt you, but can I talk a little bit about what a river is? And maybe that will help us get a little bit more into why this feels like you. Like, I mean, a river moves water, but a river also moves sediment.
Mhm,
And a river, if allowed in its natural state, has a geometry of meanders, which
mhm,
are in and of themselves waves. And a river starts at a spring and ends up at the sea, and there's a water cycle that is actually connected. So the sea will come out of the land and into the air and then back down to the land. And
Mhm.
then sometimes a river comes up from groundwater. And so anyhow, that's
Mm.
when I think of a river, I think of that. And how does that relate to your experience of you?
Yeah, I think it is that, and it's just that it's ever changing and moving and has different temperaments. Like I live near, I'm a stone's throw from the Tavy, which is the second fastest river in our country. But at the
Ah,
moment, it's really, really shallow and it's really slow. But in the winter, if we get a lot of rainfall, it will have gone like 8 foot higher than that, and it is a torrent. I mean, it's a thing to behold. You're kind of watching this thing going, wow, that's
which gets
you
at how rivers can move boulders. I
know,
mean,
it's
yeah,
just, yeah. But that ability to kind of move and shift and not be one thing, and that's when I think of rivers, I just think, well, what even is a river? Because that water that you're looking at now has now gone. That thing
yeah.
that you're looking at doesn't actually exist. It's not. It's a changing thing, and I suppose
And
there's something in that I relate to myself, because I am a shapeshifter of like different crafts, different thoughts, different, ideas, different friends, different places to live. I don't know, just changeable. And they're very ancient, like our rivers emerged, the earth was frozen for however many million years, and then as it warmed, then you sort of gradually had these rivers that started to flow, and that's where life started to come from. It just feeds everything around it, and most people tend to live around, if you look at a bird's eye view, we all tend to live around sources of water and
absolutely.
rivers. So I think for me there's some connection to the sort of old ways and the ancestors, and something like, yeah.
And as you were called back to this land, and to think about so it's ever changing, it's ever moving, and yet it's also ever present.
Mm.
And the phenomenal reality of that, and how you are living in your ancestral lands, just being British and still being in the British Isles, right? And so for me, for example, some of my heritage is British, some of it is Ukrainian, some of it is most likely California surfer dude, because my birth mother doesn't know for sure who my father is. But all that to be said, I have many different homelands, and for you to be able to physically be there, and to be there next to the river that was the source of life for your people, and to be able to go to the stones that were also, I can think you can imagine your ancestors touching them. And aren't there stone homes,
Oh,
stone
but
buildings?
still there's stone huts, so they're Bronze Age, they're about 4,000 years old, and they're scattered all over Dartmoor. So everyone's kind of generally heard of Stonehenge, and you go, Stonehenge
Yes.
is amazing. Stonehenge is amazing, but we have just a landscape that's just absolutely filled with cairns, which is the sort of burial chambers, with stone rows, which are these rows of like granite markers that sort of go off into the distance. I think the longest one's nearly a mile. We don't know what they're for. We don't know
Yeah.
what they're doing.
Yeah.
Stone circles, they're literally, I could drive about 10 minutes from here and I'll be around stone huts and circles, and this is stuff that's been there for at least 4,000 years. So
Mm.
tangibly, like I will go, like I went on the solstice and just went and sat inside the ruins of a stone hut, because of course those granite slabs are still there, like they're
Yeah.
not going anywhere, they're big, I don't even know how they move them. But
Wow.
and you can sit there and that there has been all this life. It's quite uh it's fun. It's like a fun, because we don't know what happened, we don't know how life was, but we can just sort of feel into the sort of humanness of it, and yeah.
And so something about that is, so you talked about you've been raising money for Tree Sisters, and Tree Sisters, I guess we could characterize as having two branches. One of them is to restore feminine leadership, or women's ability to be themselves in a healed way, which takes us back necessarily thousands of years. Uh, and then Tree Sisters planting trees in the tropics, because we are slowing the the change in the carbon trajectory
Mm.
to hopefully cool the earth and stabilize the climate. And so to be drawn to this land that has the presence, the palpable, like physical, touchable presence of our ancestors, and to be at this point in time when we are needing to heal, like really, really needing to heal, it just feels powerful. I'm having a hard time putting this into words, but somehow you're being there and also being you in the way that you are, which is not just local because you are present on the internet. And so being grounded in this place, using your name river in ceremony, and then also exuding yourself into the internet waves. I don't know. I feel like that's a part of your peace action, Lisa, and I don't know how to describe that in verbs.
Yeah, I guess it is. I mean, it's that's the thing. It's just in one way, it just all feels so disjointed. And I was having this conversation yesterday with a really dear friend of mine, but I just sort of just go with whatever feels like it needs to be done, and that doesn't always make sense. So the fact that I blogged all the way through having chemo didn't make sense because it was like I felt really vulnerable and I didn't like the way I looked, but so I was like, hello world. Like,
Yeah.
and also trying to bring that earth connection, that kind of spirituality into the NHS, into the mental health team feels like.
So you are working for the government, actually. Your job is a government job.
Well, it's we're part of a organisation that's contracted by the NHS, which is obviously our national health system, and
right,
which is very formulated, I suppose, very medicalized.
sure.
So,
Like I guess allopathic medicine, like, as we've come to think of healing.
Yeah, so I feel a bit of a wild card in the in that, but there's quite a lot of people that are very similar minded, so I'm not alone in that. But yeah, I guess that for me, that feels like part of my work, that is bringing that sense of connection and making it like accessible to people. So trying not to kind of, I don't know, just to make it playful, because that feels more accessible.
So I guess what you're saying, so you showed up at Dartmoor, like, I'm going to be this model of health, right? It's like maybe your ego was like imagining in a grander sort of a way that you were going to be shining a light through your own self-care, and that here you are, you're actually doing exactly that, but from a place of humility and a lot of humor and play.
But it is, I think, God, life has, only, people talk about writing the story of your life, and I think only I could have written the story of my life. So many moments in it that are just cringily sort of like dark and ironic, and
So I'm going to add a piece for here, which is don't take yourself seriously, or when you are taking yourself seriously, catch yourself taking yourself seriously. And
exactly, just whatever you however you're being, and realize that I don't know, we're getting a little bit woo woo, but that it all matters, but it also all doesn't matter. Just be free and allow yourself to be creative and curious and playful, because that's what we need right now. If we keep thinking in these really linear, sort of structured masculine or distorted masculine ways, we're not going to find the way through. What it needs people to really drop into something different.
and so to come to that grounding, to come to that center and place through play, inspires creativity, which in itself is to bring something new into being that didn't exist before, in a community sort of a way, to find our way through this remarkable what could be very serious and is very serious place in history. And yet if we were to just be in that serious mode, that shuts down the life from flowing, right? The life from cutting the river, from cutting a new path.
Absolutely, and that connection to each other. And what we need is our connection to ourselves, to each other, and to the earth. And if any one of those things is cut short, it's very, you're not going to live a particularly, happy. None of us are going to live a particularly happy life. So yeah, anything that helps connection. Yeah.
And to allow that not only through play but also through touch. So I'm looking at this wall hanging behind you, and knowing that you touched it, like every knot that's there, you touched it.
Which I love, I appreciate that in other people's crafts. I love it. If there's a handmade bowl or a hand thrown pot or a weaving or something, or clothes that have been made by hand, like, that's really beautiful.
So you hold it in your eyes, but you also hold it in your hands, or if you're wearing it, you hold it on your skin, and that experience so important.
Yeah. Well, it's magic. That's why my cheesy name comes from, is the magic thread, because it is magic.
And yet, you say cheesy, and you said that a couple times, but it's like allowing that permission of the goofiness and of the to be magic. Is like when we were kids, all of us, like when we were like somewhere between 4 and 8 years old, and that full on creative connection to our imagination, that it is magic, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to give permission.
And I remember that. I'm very lucky. I had a really good childhood, and I can remember that feeling of curiousness. And I've always been the same way, just like a crazy womble. I look at things, but not in the way that other people might look at things. And I could entertain myself for an hour with, or hours, just looking for stones on the beach, or, that kind of just inner world that I used to create. Yeah, that's what's coming out today more now, I think.
Or the sticking of one's head in the river, like the just, what would this feel like? What
my favorite thing to do is just like look for driftwood. Even now, that is my favorite pastime. And I wanted to go today, but it's been really stormy. So I'm sort of dying to get down the beach and just have a little womble around. Yeah.
Wow, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground. Was there anything else that you showed up to this conversation hoping that we would be able to talk about?
No, it's been really beautiful, and thank you. So I really didn't think I had much to say or what I would say, but it turns out I have.
Yes, and as I already knew, hence the invitation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been really, really fun to spend time with you and to explore these concepts. And
thank you. Yeah, and thank you for weaving it all together. I kind of feel like my beingness makes more sense. Now I've had it reflected back at me. It's like, okay.
Yeah, so this project, so I just go quickly flip to the piece wall. When I started putting this together, I was working full time as an environmental scientist in a job I'd had for 18 years. And I remember this was my first idea of, well, what does it mean to be in my business? And I went and talked to my supervisor and said, I think I'm quitting this job. And I think it has something to do with a wall full of piece verbs. And that was like really economically not smart at that point in time, because like this may never be something I monetize at all, but something about listening to that inner voice and knowing that there's something that we each have to contribute and not squelching that. And so you just said, thank you for weaving it together. And I'm grateful that I have this calling and that I'm having these conversations, if nothing else, just to have. I'm hoping for 50 to 100 conversations. We'll see how many actually happen.
Amazing. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you too. I'm going to
carry on your playful creativity and your curiosity of people, and weaving it all together.
Thank you. Thank you.